Welcome to the Newfoundland Lens. I am Michael Winsor, your host and co-host here, Cory Babstock. Today we're excited to welcome one of our Newfoundland and Labrador's most well-known and trusted meteorologists. He is the person many of us turn to when we want to know what the weather is doing, especially when we're planning to get outside with our cameras. From tracking storms to forecasting those perfect sunset and sunrise conditions, we're thrilled to have Eddie Shear join us today. Eddie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, guys.
Oh, our pleasure.
So today our plan is we'll just basically have more around chatting about photography and how it relates to the weather conditions, sunsets, sunrises, and anything that Eddie can educate us on when it comes to any icebergs that come down here or good time to get out there and check out those beautiful sunsets.
Sure. No, I'm familiar with both of your works. You're both wonderful artists and photographers. So
Thank you, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So I guess, Eddie, you've been busy now this winter with all the snow we've been having.
oh man, I was starting Sheerr weather. The best thing for my business is bad weather, obviously. And I was saying to some friends, it's like, I hope it's like the snowiest winter we've had in like 20 years. And well, I got it.
What you asked for.
February was the snowiest month we've had, I think, in 26 years, actually. So it was outrageously snowy, and it's been snowy basically since December. And now here we are, end of March, and a lot of areas this morning on March 29th had their coldest morning of the winter, which is actually outrageous this late in the year.
I woke up this morning here, Eddie, in Clarenville, where I am, and looked out and saw another fresh coat of white. And it was just like, man, I'm done.
I know.
I love the snow. I love it. But
I'm this morning and I'm like, looking at the radar, I'm like, that's not going to reach the ground. And it's just like snow enough to got picked up a couple centimeters. And it's like, enough already, enough. And then I look at the forecast and I'm getting normally I can look at a forecast and I don't want rain. And now I'm looking at it I don't want to see another snowstorm in the forecast. And it looks like there is potentially on Wednesday. And I'm just like, enough already. It's almost April. But that happens sometimes. I mean, I've seen snow here in late June, so it's not.
We had, back in my old life, I worked with Kent Building Supplies. I was an operations manager. And in Gander, one May 24th weekend, we had just gotten all of our flowers in for the beginning of the season. And sit up all outside all night, and we got dumped that particular May 24th, 60 centimeters of snow May 24th weekend.
I've heard about that May 24 snowstorm. No, I don't think I was in Newfoundland yet, but I think it was 2017. We had significant snow in parts of central interior in late June.
Yeah,
and
crazy.
I was refusing to forecast the snow. I'm not forecasting snow. So I've seen it happen. And it's that's a one and done, hopefully, type thing. So
We got some beautiful pictures though in the winter here as well. A few years ago, I went to Western Brook Pond Gorge and does the snowmobile ride up to the top. And the weather conditions up there then is just magic when it comes to March month and stuff most times.
Snow is beautiful, and I do enjoy it. It's just we had a lot this year. But that area in particular, to get a sunny day on the West Coast, you probably got to wait till late in the year because it's cloudy there a lot. And people from the West Coast will say, "Oh, we have the best weather." It's yeah, you have nice summers, and you have nice falls, and you actually have spring. But in the winter, it's cloudy and it snows a lot, and it's cloudy a lot more over there in the winter than it is on the East Coast. So something might be counterintuitive.
That's a good point because I've been trying to go over do the trip again. But I got someone over to waiting, and usually by Wednesday to see if we get up there because I want to get a sunset because last time it was cloudy. And every time we look, it's always snowing or cloudy. So
that's the wind thing to be. Well, it's the wind direction, right? So, you have a relatively warm Gulf of St. Lawrence. And I mean, even if it's, if there's ice, still a bit of a heat sink, there's still some heat there. And when the air is cold and blows over the Gulf, that creates basically some instability where, the air aloft is cold and the ground is warm. And that just generates lift, and that lift generates cloud cover. And once that cloud cover moisture hits the mountains, it generally falls as snow. And that process can start, in October, November. And, even now we can get onshore flurries and snow squalls and stuff on the West Coast. But as long as the wind is out of the west, it's cloudy and likely flurries or drizzle or snow. And depending on how big a temperature differential is and and how aligned the winds are as you go up in the atmosphere will determine how intense the snow squalls can be on the West Coast.
So I'm still hoping to get over there. You've been over to a place in Battle Cove on the West Coast.
I've seen pictures from Bottle Cove, and it's a place I've actually tried to get to a few times since because I haven't been in Waterberg now in a couple of years, but I've wanted to get out there because I've seen photos from Bottle Cove, and it looks like a stunning place.
It is.
For a photographer, it's one of the best landscape pictures you can get. And we'll find the sun comes in off the ocean. And when it do, it's just magic. The clouds, especially in the fall.
Yeah.
So Newfoundland, I'm not sure if there's anything you tell us about that. But do you find like in the fall, there's better sunlight for photographers than in the summer?
I mean, I think the fall is probably like the most consistently, I won't say sunny, but generally like, I don't know if that's just a facet of like the days are getting a little bit shorter. So, your golden hours, like, 7, 8 o'clock versus like 8, 9 o'clock.
Mhm.
And maybe the days are like the sunset, twilight might be a little shorter, in the summer, like, it's, the sun might set at 9:02, I think is the latest here on the East Coast, and a little bit later in the West, but it's light on the horizon for, till almost 10
A long
o'clock,
time.
like,
Yeah.
in kind of June, July. And so it just might be the facet of time of year, and kind of like the sun does, obviously go back and forth in the horizon a bit, depending on what time of year it is. So maybe it's like that time of year, like, the sun angle could be lower, could be in a better spot for some of these areas that you like to go get shots for. And, there's a whole bunch of stuff that kind of plays into that. And the spring may be similar, but the spring is, generally on this side of the island, a lot cloudier and colder and less pleasant to be outside. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
That's what we find. I find in the fall when it comes to taking pictures of sunsets, there's more purples and stuff in there and oranges. And I just wonder why that was.
I would imagine it could be just where the sun starts to go on the horizon, right? Because the more the sun has to kind of shine through the atmosphere, essentially the more wavelength has to go through the atmosphere. So probably the more color you're going to get, or maybe you're going to get like a more consistent color. Whereas in the summer here, the sun is pretty well shining, mostly straight down, but it's as high as it's going to be. Whereas in the fall, it's kind of lower on the horizon. So maybe as it's shining through more atmosphere, you do get, more of the underlit skies and some really dramatic skies. And I find that actually really interesting about Newfoundland and Labrador is, I've been to, a lot of places in the US where, you're further south and you're like, oh, it's going to be a wicked sunset. Look at and it just doesn't happen. And then here it could be like overcast all day. And then even in the summer, the sun dips below the clouds a little bit and you get these wicked sunsets, like almost out of nowhere sometimes. And it's really interesting.
Capture the beauty of wildlife, icebergs, and incredible landscapes through your own camera lens. With expert instruction, workshops, guided tours, and more. Newfoundland Photo Tours. Book your experience today.
We tell our guests, and like most of the bulk of our guests we take on tours are, I would say, American or Central Canadian, Western Canadian, just not on the coast here. And it's the one thing we always tell them when we're doing a sunrise or a sunset is like, just wait like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5, just in that little bit of time, man, it can go from, like you were saying, nothing to boom.
Right.
And
the skies
how often does that happen? Yeah, it just develops. It
Oh,
develops very quickly.
like all of a sudden you look outside and the sky's like bright red or bright pink or purple. Like it's pretty crazy. We had one last night, actually. My kids were like,
It
on the
is.
bed.
Yep.
They're like, look at the sky. And like, it was just like bright pink.
Oh yeah, I was sitting in my living room and my back window, the sun sets like pretty much to my back. And I was watching TV and all of a sudden my wall started turning this pink and purple color. And I was like, what is going on? I turned around and ran around the back deck with the camera, see what I could catch. But it was, just like out of nowhere, there was no indication we were going to get anything like that. Nothing.
It's like the sun goes under like kind of the undercast, and it just like, if the clouds are high enough and the sun get just under that, like you can get some really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, sometimes the cloud decks that we have are like real thin, and like they're thin enough that like it's thick enough that it blocks out a lot of sunlight, but it's thin enough that it like, and there might be not be any clouds above it. Like I've taken off from St. John's so many times, and like you're in the fog for like 10 seconds, and after takeoff, it's a bright blue sky above the fog.
Yeah.
It's like, is that close, really? Right?
Yeah.
We do a lot of tours from St. John's to Bonavista. Like most of our tours is there. So we leave St. John's and it's foggy. We get to Clarabelle, beautiful sunny day. I guess the Bonavista is
Bonavista?
cloudy.
Foggy.
Or foggy, yeah,
Yeah.
same thing.
Well, it's that old adage of, right, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, or you can drive 5 kilometers here. And you're
Yeah.
right to it.
Like, if that's the case, like, you might want to try, like, it's foggy in St. John's, it's probably foggy in Bonavista. But maybe, like, when you get to Port Rexton, you can go over, like, Kings Cove, and it should be clear on the other side, on the Bonavista Bay side of the peninsula.
It's true.
And you go past Loxton.
that side of the peninsula back down where Open Hall, Tickle Cove,
Mhm.
and that area is, for my money, is the best sunset on the Bonavista Peninsula.
Oh,
Consistently.
it's probably gorgeous.
And you got a lot of the old abandoned houses and everything there for your foreground shot. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful area.
You'd be shocked at, like, I was up there a couple of years ago camping, and we were up, I think, in Champions West, and it was like, I don't know, like 10, 12 degrees foggy. And you'd think, like, the weather in the Avalon can be different. Well, like, Champions West and Port Rexton is maybe 6 kilometers of the crow flies from Loxton Path. And you go up the dirt road, Loxton Path, and it was 30 degrees in summer.
Yep.
Like, which is crazy. So probably the same on the other side, but, as long as it was out of the east, it's going to be kind of cold and damp and cruddy.
There's a lot of fog over in Trinity. We find, like, there's a boat tour companies over there, and there's one of them that actually takes their boat and goes over to Princeton and goes out of there lots of times in the summer, just because it's always so foggy in Trinity Bay versus Bonavista.
Yeah, when the wind anytime out of, like, the northeast, like, it's going to be, unless it's like the air is super dry, it's going to be really foggy.
That's why we really like the Bonavista Peninsula for us as tour operators, is that although it's all relatively close, where you have a peninsula, totally different weather conditions on both sides.
Oh, yeah.
It's made very flexible for us. If one side's not that great, we just drive, the 20 minutes or 30 minutes, not even. You're into a completely different.
Oh, yeah.
Weather pattern, completely different.
Oh, yeah. I'm not surprised to hear that at all.
Yeah. And even we comment often, Michael, when we take Zodiac tours at the Bonavista, and you just go around the Cape Bonavista. As soon as you come around to Cape Bonavista, it's starting to hit up towards Trinity Bay. Completely different environment again. Just almost like somebody snapped a chalk line, and on one side of it's 25 degrees, on the other side 10 degrees.
Well, when I used to roll, like, we'd run out Cape City Lake in St. John's, and, like, it could be, and you could have an evening, if the winds are light, it could be 20 something degrees down at the bottom of the lake where you start, and you go down, you row down by the Kitty Vitty gut side, and you row right into the sea breeze, and temperature drop, like, down to 10, 12 degrees, and you'd be cold, and you come around, and it's like going through a wall. It was like cold and then warm, and, like, if you could see air, it'd be really cool. It'd just be like a cool curtain there.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So do you find, like, I guess, forecasting in Newfoundland harder than other places just because of where we are located, or is it pretty much similar as other places?
No, I mean, Newfoundland's very unique just because we have, like, very few places in, like, Eastern North America have, the climate we have, where we have, like, the cold ocean and Labrador current. We've got the warmer that can come off the continent. And then you have the crazy terrain, which is, sea level to 500 feet, like, right at the ocean. And that really doesn't exist anywhere else, on this side of North America other than, of course, in Labrador. And so it makes things really difficult at times to forecast because that terrain can induce some really strange things with winter storms or with sea breezes. And, and the Avalon has some really odd terrain as well, which is what lends to, like, it could be a spring day and 2 degrees out in Logie Bay, and it could be 15 degrees in CBS and, sunshine and, like, to split the rocks. And it's just the terrain does that. The Labrador current does that, and then you have all the different types of storms that come off. And, we're not exactly in an area where there's a lot of data sometimes. So you can have, I'll say, surprise storms, but storms that are not forecast overly well, and then ends up leading to more snow or less snow than forecast, depending where the storms are coming from. And, basically it's a lot of, like, trial and error, a lot of experience and saying, okay, the last time this happened, this was the case. And, I've been here now for like 12, 13 years. There's not a lot at this point I haven't seen. So generally when a forecast is challenging, I kind of understand why it's challenging. But no, it's really a challenging forecast environment compared to, a lot of other areas I've lived with the microclimates and then just the challenging weather from the large scale systems.
So just the fog itself, because one time I was coming back on a tour from wherever, and when we just left to come down on Ring Road to come down, just get into St. John's, it was 21 degrees on my dash, and I had dropped the people off at the hotel downtown. So the fog was coming in. We got downtown, it was 5 degrees.
Yep.
So it was like, it dropped like 16 degrees and just that little bit distant because of the fog that was coming in.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
that's all
funny.
it's all just sea breezes. I mean, it's basically sea breeze, land breeze, and the ocean is very cold, so that fog will creep on in when the winds are generally pretty light, or when the weather pattern changes in the spring and you can kind of see it coming. But fog is not overly difficult to forecast. It's frustrating to forecast, but it's not like with respect to other forecasts that make forecasting fog and the avalanche actually pretty easy. Now,
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to, you were saying about Newfoundland being challenging, difficult.
Yeah.
Now, as a professional, as a meteorologist, is that something that you embrace and enjoy? Like, do you sometimes wish you were somewhere where it was a bit more calm, a bit more settled? Or is this kind of chaotic weather? Is that something you get excited about?
I think it depends on the system that's coming in, but generally, like with big storms, I get excited about that. Like, I do what I do because I really like weather. I like to talk about weather. I like to tell people about weather. And luckily I can combine those three things and make a living off of it, which is wonderful. But no, like I enjoy the challenging systems. I enjoy the bigger systems, that stuff kind of, when I get excited about weather, that's generally not a good thing for the public. I'm like, oh man, it's going to be a good storm. And everyone's like, what do you mean good? Well, I was going to snow really hard. It's like, well, I don't like that. It's like, well, I do.
It's funny you say that because I think it was one of the big snowstorms we had this year. I can't remember which one because they all kind of faded into one, but you were posting and you're very excited on Facebook about what was coming and what the possibility was. I looked at my wife and I said, well, we could be in a lot of trouble. Is Eddie pretty excited about this one? I think it could be. Dang.
If I'm excited about a snowstorm, we're like, that's at least like 2 feet. I'm looking at like 50, 60 centimeters. It's pretty likely. I'm like, all right, let's see how much we can get.
Just a question for this upcoming summer. I don't know if there's any predictions, but do you think it's going to be like a normal foggy one or it's going to be really dry like last year?
I think it's going to be hard to be as dry as last year just because we've had, so much snow and precipitation over the winter. So, having a super dry summer now, even so, it's still certainly a possibility. Like, if it gets warm, we could lose our snow real fast. If it doesn't rain, it's still going to get really dry. And, all the precipitation we had this winter will go into the lakes and streams and stuff, but, fire danger will still be there. I honestly don't know. Like my area of expertise is not like the long range forecasts. And to be honest, like long range forecasts for this part of the world aren't always like the best because like Newfoundland and Labrador doesn't correlate a lot to like La Nina and El Nino and things like that. But I mean, the last several summers have been very nice and, it stands to reason that, this one should be similar as well. There seems to be more the norm now than anything else.
Really hot.
Yeah.
I had someone on tour last year. She came to take a lot of pictures of like shids and stuff, and she went out like the moody ones, ran fog and all that. Here in June, she was at 4 days, and it was like blue sky for 4 days. It was like, man, if I was in Vegas, I'd be like, put money that this is not going to happen 4 days in June of sunny, but it was.
It happened. I mean, we had like, that was it, July or August. We had like 2 or 3 days in a row where it was like 30 odd degrees during the day and, 28, 30 degrees and like dropping down to like teens at night because the air was super dry. Like that is super unusual for Newfoundland, especially Eastern Newfoundland, to get like those big temperature differentials. Typically, if it's 28 degrees during the day, it's dropping down like 20 at night because it's super humid. But it was like a heat dome and it was just hot and dry. We've had that kind of set up for the last few summers. I do a lot of camping. Not last summer, summer before that, we were out camping in Notre Dame, Finch Park. Beautiful spot, but they don't have electricity hookups. And, I say camping, we have a travel trailer with air conditioning, which is wonderful when you have, when you're on a generator. But when you're in a generator, and you got to turn that off in the evening and the trailer's ice and cool because the air's been out for a couple hours. Doesn't stay cool in there for long when it's, 27, 28 degrees out in the middle of the night. You get real warm real fast.
I think it was not last summer or summer before. I had a couple from Texas that came up and they were really excited. I was talking to them before they came up. And of course, I always ask, what's your expectations? What are you looking for? What's your money shot? What do you want to get? But the one thing they kept going back to is that they wanted to come up and cool off because it was really hot in Texas, right?
Yeah.
So they got off the plane. It might have been mid-July. They got off the plane, St. John's, and it was like 30-something degrees. And I picked them up at the airport, and they said, we brought nothing. We didn't bring any shorts. So we had stopped in Walmart before we went anywhere. And they had to outfit themselves for the They were shocked.
I know.
It's supposed to be cold here, man.
Yeah.
And it's hotter here than it's in Texas.
You can find the cooler, it's south, Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's go escape. Let's go on the St. Vincent's.
Well, we went on the Zodiac run. I said, now you're going to get cool.
Oh yeah.
Because they were saying they offered them survival suits, and it was really warm. And they said, I don't know if I want a survival suit. I said, put on the survival suit when you get out around the Cape there.
It'll be cold.
Yeah, but it was so funny because they came prepared for rain and cool temperatures, as you would.
Oh yeah, no, we haven't. Summers have been nice. I mean, real nice lately.
Gorgeous.
Another, I guess, question there. When it comes to like dramatic skies, onto like after a storm or before a storm, is when you get like the really cool, amazing pictures with the clouds and stuff. Any reason for that? Certain types of clouds, or there?
I mean, certain types of clouds probably coming in ahead of the storm. Like the red sky in morning. Sailors take warning, I think, is the old adage, and it's probably the cloud. What's that?
Is there any truth to that? Like,
I think so. I mean, if I have to think about it like critically, I suppose that adage probably came from, sailors mostly going probably from east to west, and the sun rises in the east, right? So looking to the west, weather comes from the west. So if the sun's, rising and you see red sky in front of you, you're probably going to go in some pretty gnarly weather because you're looking at weather that's coming at you. And probably the opposite, sun sets in the west, looks to the east, by that time you're probably past the weather. Maybe not every time. That's what I can kind of figure out in my head as to why that would be. And I could be way off. Maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't. But yeah, I mean, there's something to it. I mean, for sure. I think it's just, as clouds spin before a storm and the sunrise is timed right, you get that really red kind of sunrise. A lot of texture in the cloud cover, especially if they're kind of stratusy clouds or cirrostratus, cumulostratus. Probably same thing in the evening behind a storm, especially if the cloud deck is just leaving, same thing, it's underlit. Clouds have a lot of texture, but when you're not seeing it lit from underneath, you're not going to see it. So the texture in the cloud, the redness of the cloud can be really illuminated a lot when the sun gets low on the horizon, especially post or pre-storm.
Yeah, no, that's when I get excited when sunrise or sunset's coming, if I can see a cloud deck that's got some rolling to it, some character. So, because every one of those little bumps in the cloud will pick up a different shaft of light. So you're going to get that nice layering of color.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
So I guess it came from fishermen, and my grandfather was a fisherman. And another thing he used to use is the little barometer. He used to live by that. And so if the needle go down, he used to live by it more than anything.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Every household had a little barometer.
People still have them. We have low pressure. People will send me more pictures of their barometers, and then it's like, pressure's getting lower. It's like, yeah, it's still pressure dropping. The storm's coming in, and then when the pressure starts to go up, the storm's past us, and things should start to improve generally within a short-ish amount of time. But there's something to that, and fishermen, they have they know their environment very well, and there's something to be said for what they know about what they experience. And from a scientific perspective, I can say this is what it should be, but I'm not the one out on the ocean hauling up fish nets, and my life doesn't the safety of my life doesn't depend on my ability to read weather out in the ocean. It's very important that people who do work on the ocean can recognize basically weather patterns, because things can change very quickly, and the ocean can go from what seems very safe 1 minute to very, very dangerous in the next. So it's very important to kind of recognize those kind of patterns and
100%,
things like that.
Learn how to capture the best images and develop your camera skills with workshops held in Newfoundland and Labrador's most inspiring natural landscapes. Newfoundland Photo Tours. Book your workshop today.
So we're soon going to be approaching the iceberg season. So we're hopefully getting some icebergs coming. I think there was one seen up in there a couple of weeks ago. Any idea of what you think? Any icebergs be coming down, or?
I can have a peek at the iceberg, sure.
There was a gentleman on the iceberg report this morning in Twillingate. The pack ice is just offshore down there now. There's a white line right on the horizon.
Oh yeah, I would say it's probably going to.
Pack ice.
There was one year I was actually right into Fort Amherst. I got a picture. I think it was the only time I ever saw it.
Icebergs this past season just out in off St. John's. I know people were down around the marine lab.
Oh yeah, there was the one last year down there, and I actually took my drone up to see if I could get close to it. The thing about icebergs is they look a lot closer than they are. And so when you look at it and it's offshore and oh, that's not very far, and you start flying your drone out and you're like 500 meters, a kilometer, more than 1 kilometer, you're like, geez. And you think it's right there, and they're so big that you can't judge how far offshore they are, even when they look real close.
I drone it like that sometimes too, and just I say, okay, no, I've got to come back because it's not going to make it out there and back. Right?
Yeah, there's some icebergs around. I'm looking at the chart here. There's a couple per degree square. There's a few off the coast of Labrador, but there's nothing like super impressive yet. But it's more pack ice season now than iceberg season. Last year, like around Twilling Gate, like in May and June, it was like, there was like 20s, up there. There was a lot. And, like icebergs are certainly something that are really cool to get pictured of. I think it's still a bit early to get, super excited about iceberg season, but, we're not quite there yet. But, ultimately, what drives a good iceberg season is a cold spring, and if we get, there's an old adage in Newfoundland. It's like, the icebergs bring the cold weather. It's like, no. A really crappy spring weather pattern brings the icebergs, right? So like if we get like a few weeks of like onshore northerly easterly flow or in a blocking pattern, that's what you want if you want the icebergs to get pushed toward the land, because those are onshore northerly winds, pushes all the ice, all the icebergs right toward the shoreline. And so I can see how those two things are kind of flip-flopped. But when it's warm, all that gets pushed the other way, right? And icebergs, I think, they're dominated, steering by the Labrador current, which kind of moves them from north to south, but then locally from the wind direction. Right? And so, if we have a real cold spring, you'll bet there'll be some icebergs and some sea ice around. But if it's a warm spring, you probably won't get them. Which that last spring and summer was kind of neat because it was, I think we did have a bit of a cool spring and it switched in June, and there were still lots of icebergs around even after it switched.
It already been pushed in on shore, hung up on shore, so they were hanging around.
Exactly.
Last year was a banner year for icebergs, to the best of my memory. They were just everywhere, and they stayed, and they split, and then they stayed. You went from having one big iceberg to having 3 or 4 small icebergs in the same bay.
Yeah,
and it was great. Yeah,
it was very cool.
Great season.
Yeah,
the one at 20 Gate, that was massive. That one, the first one.
Yeah, I got pictures. I got a bunch of pictures of that one. I think I was by like back. I forgot what the cove is, or Twilling Gate, but it was like
Manuel's Cove,
something like that.
Right? Yeah. But what a boon to that whole economy, for about 2 months straight while those icebergs were there. You couldn't get a place to eat. You couldn't get a place to sleep in Twilling Gate. It was just on wheels that whole iceberg season.
And it's great. I mean, it's great for the area up there for tourism to be that big. For the whole northeast coast, I mean, icebergs like that is certainly a big driver of tourism, which is a huge part of our economy here in the spring and summer and fall.
I was just saying, when it comes to even the 20 Gate, there were so many people in there that it was so busy that even the cell phones didn't work. There's just so many users as that cell towers didn't hold it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, which is I wouldn't say it's par for the course because it's not, but when you go to Twilling Gate, when you leave Gander, there's no cell service until you get to Twilling Gate.
West Coast is bad too, but that's a whole other story.
That is a whole other conversation to have.
Well, we find talking about icebergs, and Michael runs into this as well as me. People booking their trips, wanting to come and say, when's the best time to see icebergs? And it's always to have that conversation with them that we can tell you this is the optimum time to come and see icebergs. You don't know. These people are booking their trips, sometimes a year in advance. So it's important to be clear with people that we can't promise you're going to see them, because we got lots of other nice stuff to see and photograph and to share. But the icebergs are going to be the icing on the cake.
You can't, you can say like you said, like, oh, they're most likely in May and June, not so much in July. There's always the asterisk though, like. It depends on the weather pattern. It depends what the year looks like iceberg-wise.
Honesty is best policy, right? You're going to say we can't guarantee. We're going to try our very best to get you in the best place possible, optimize your opportunities. But at the end of the day, we're at the mercy of nature.
Yep.
So,
well, Atlantic puffins always show up, and there's a lot of you want to see those. So.
Exactly. They usually get pretty happy when we show them a puffin.
Perfect.
That's the one thing I always tell people. I said, I can't guarantee a lot, but I guarantee you'll see a puffin. I guarantee you won't see one close, but I guarantee you're going to see a puffin.
We'll get you seeing some puffins.
Yeah.
Thing you want to do yourself, Eddie? Like any tips or anything you want to talk about photography? Like I know you share a lot of photography when it comes on your site and the Sheerr app and stuff as well that you have going on.
I enjoy photography myself, obviously not as much as you two. But I mean, if folks have photos, happy to get them and share them. You can submit them right in the app. I've gotten some really nice photos there. But I'm happy to share any photos of Newfoundland and Labrador that are beautiful to showcase the province. I've heard there are people that have come to visit our province from me sharing photos on social media who have never heard of Newfoundland and Labrador before. Whatever I can do to help spread the message and directly or indirectly impact tourism with somebody coming to visit and booking a stay and spending money. So there's a lot of direct and indirect elements that come from just sharing photos of our province wherever you can share them, because you don't know where that's going to go. So folks have pictures, I'm happy to share them, right? And I'm always willing to credit the photographer.
It's really helped I've seen photos shared, throughout your career and your various broadcasts and now with your own endeavor. This helped me a lot as a photographer, because there's places I'm born and bred, grown in Newfoundland, and grown up. This is all I've known, except for a brief amount of time in Nova Scotia. I've seen photos shared by you of places that I've never heard of, and I've planned a trip to go and take photos in that spot because the photos were spectacular. So I want to thank you for doing that. That's, it's a great service.
Oh, no, bro. I mean, in Newfoundland and Labrador, beautiful places in this province, and the island itself is bigger than I think a lot of people who even grew up here kind of recognize. And there's so much wilderness here. And a lot of us have seen the East Coast and the Northeast Coast and, through Central and the West Coast. I've been down the Harbor Breton once, and it's beautiful. The South Coast, I know it's foggy there a lot in the summer, but the pictures that you see from there are absolutely stunning. And it is a long way to get to the South Coast from basically anywhere in the north, which is basically where a lot of our communities are. But it's gorgeous down there. And I'd love to get down there and see what the South Coast actually looks like to the eye. And then Labrador, I got into Labrador last summer. I got to do some flying around and went to Igloo Lake Lodge and got up into Crooks Lake and really saw what Labrador has to offer. And I mean, you think Newfoundland is big, Labrador is big. It's called the Big Land for a reason. I mean, you leave for a reason. Yeah. You leave Goose Bay and you start flying, and there's just wilderness as far as you can see. And it is unbelievably gorgeous. And this whole province is stunning. And there's just so many nooks and crannies that many of us will never get to see that are absolutely gorgeous. 100%. You don't find scenery like this on the East Coast of the U.S. Or East Coast of North America. You just don't see it like we have here.
Yeah.
I kind of, at least, I guess, back around to, the podcast, and the reason why we started is try to get yourself and other people and ourselves just talk about Newfoundland. And our podcast has grown overwhelmingly, actually, just because people want to know about Newfoundland. There's really no avenue. So anytime you have yourself on, we do appreciate it that we can come together and talk about Newfoundland and what we have here and the gorgeous weather we have and the snowstorms as well.
I think there's a market for extreme weather tourism too. Yeah. People want to see snow. If people want to come see snow, I'll guarantee you snow. I'll promise you. Just how far we got to go to find it.
Well, you only got to read the comments when you post pictures of snow up over people's front doors.
Oh, I know.
From people.
I know.
My Lord. Yeah, they get excited about it. That's for sure.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tourism over in the West Coast on snowmobiling over there too.
Yeah.
So that's always.
Oh, yes.
No, I was just going to say, if there's, could clue it up here now. So again, if there's anything you want to mention, then just go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, folks who don't know, maybe watching from away, or maybe you don't know where I've been. If you're in Newfoundland, maybe you thought I went under a rock. I left, I had a wonderful career with NTV. I left back in June of 2025. I started Sheerr Weather in July of 2025, and I've been doing that now into 2026. So if you're looking for, my style of forecasts for Newfoundland Labrador weather, you can find my website, sheerweather.ca, SHERR weather.ca. I have my app, Sheerr Weather, in the Apple App Store, Google Play Store, and find me on Facebook, Meteorologist Eddie Shear. And basically every other platform is just Eddie Shear. With forecasting for the province, 5, 6, 7 days a week with, long form forecast videos over Facebook and YouTube and lots of coverage elsewhere. So, I'm just trying to cover the weather in a kind of new way, but blend traditional and not traditional kind of platforms and keep things rolling and just reach, keep everyone informed as best I can across multiple platforms.
We religiously watched your forecast when you were on TV as a family. When you left, we got a little bit concerned there for a while, and I would imagine there was a lot of other Newfoundlanders who got a little concerned. And we were thrilled that you started this new endeavor. We were early adopters, I think.
Thank you very much.
So keep on doing what you're doing. It's a real service.
Thank you very much. Will do.
And I do have the app myself. And when I'm going to be taking pictures, of course, and all that, I just make sure I update on all the forecasts because we're all about the light. So get
Oh, yeah.
any updates, and I do find you provide more updates than pretty much anyone else. So we do definitely appreciate it.
100%.
No problem at all.
Absolutely.
And if you guys want, like, you know, more customized forecasts, like, you know, feel free to, you know, send me a text, email, whenever. I'm happy to help in any way. So.
Sounds
All
good.
right. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. And as we say here on the Newfoundland Lanes, keep your eyes on the horizon and your heart in Newfoundland. Until next time.
Thanks, Eddie.